world where values shape destinies, a new truth emerges. Conservative men, with their unwavering principles and unapologetic masculinity, are capturing the hearts of women
to take care of you and to provide,
and soaring to new heights of success. What sets these men apart? It's not just their confidence, it's their respect for tradition, their commitment to family, and their unyielding drive to make a difference. A seismic shift is taking place. A study reveals a surge in 12th grade boys embracing conservative values, a trend reshaping the future. And now, we dive deep into this phenomenon. Join us as we uncover the story behind the trend. An exclusive conversation between Chris Williamson and George the Tin Man will unveil the secrets behind why conservative values are more appealing to young men. Join us as we delve into the untold truths, exposing the reality behind how men navigate the justice system, the heart-wrenching reasons behind male suicide, and the hidden face of domestic violence. Uncover the startling facts as we unravel the Pay Gap Hoax, dissecting the truths that are reshaping the narrative. And that's not all. We'll journey through the extraordinary tale of Norah Vincent, unveiling the deep-seated insights that changed her perception forever.
You're attracted to women. Were you ever aroused during any of these?
I really ran smack up against the difference between male and female sexuality, is that female sexuality is mental. It's up here.
If a woman has a problem, we ask, what can we do to fix society? If a man has a problem, we ask, what can men do to fix themselves? It's a blatant double standard, and people who are unwilling to admit any structural disadvantages faced by men are standing in the way of us solving the problems that are hurting men and also the potential partners who they may no longer be viable for. What's the point in asking men to talk if we are unwilling to listen or even acknowledge the societal issues that they're talking about? The problems are not in men's heads, but out there in society, and we should not gaslight men into thinking they can solve these problems by just trying harder or being less toxically masculine. If the patriarchy is so powerful, why aren't men flourishing more?
What a great speech! Chris' perspective sheds light on a crucial issue that often goes unaddressed. The comparison between how societal problems faced by women and men are treated is indeed thought-provoking. He points out the existence of a double standard where problems faced by women are often attributed to systemic issues in society, while problems faced by men are frequently framed as issues men themselves should resolve. Raising awareness of these inequalities is the first step towards creating a more balanced and equitable society. Despite the unfairness, it is also important to consider that men should accept the world is unfair and still strive to play their hand at the best of their ability. Do not complain. Do something about it.
That's why so many policies are for them. That's why you have the Biden agenda of women and Obama's sort of review of women's issues, and we have the White House Commission of Women and Girls, which don't exist for men and boys. Like there's a dozen or so, 15 I think states and a half commissions for women and girls set up by politicians, none for boys. There's 4 offices of women's health in America, none for boys and men. There's like a national coalition for women and girls in education, doesn't exist for men. Even like the Bureau of Labor has a women's bureau, not for men. And it's like, if you consider the fact that thousands and thousands of men die at work every single year in America, more men die at work in America every year than all of the American military deaths in the entire Iraq War for 20 years. So all the deaths from the Iraq War in America, that's how many men die every year at work. Massive issue. No men's bureau in the Bureau of Labor. And I'm like, come on, like.
This idea challenges the common belief that our society is mostly run by men and is a patriarchy. Instead, it suggests that women might have more influence and we end up in a matriarchy. This perspective points out that while we often talk about the problems faced by women, we should also pay attention to problems that affect men. There is little or no representation of men's rights, especially considering the sheer number of men that die every year in the workplace. For example, in 2020, there were 4,377 male occupational injury deaths in the United States, compared to 387 deaths among women. That should never be acceptable.
About the gender pay gap, I know this is something that you've looked at quite a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to say. I mean, I guess first of all, I'd say it's not a gap between men and women. It's a gap between mothers and fathers. And there's some really excellent, I mean, I love graphics. There's a really great graphic of like different countries. And you see men and women's salaries going up like this together over time. And then women's comes down and men's carries on going. And it's like, well, what happened there? It was all going so well. And then suddenly, boo, and it's like, they had a child, and the women have taken time off work to have a child. They get longer maternity leave in the UK. And if they do go back to work, they go back part-time, if at all. So I'd say it's better seen as a child penalty paid by mothers.
One thing I want to clarify. It is not a gap between mothers and fathers. It is basically a gap between mothers and all the rest of the workers. For example, women that have never been married and have never had any child earn more money than men that have never been married and don't have any child. You see, when moms have kids, they often need to take time off work to take care of them. This can lead to them earning less money compared to other workers who don't take as much time off. Now, imagine if this pay gap was actually about men and women. If this was the case, CEOs might start hiring only women to optimize the cost of salary. The gender pay gap is a red herring which, once put under the microscope, reveals that men and women are different and want different things in life. It is almost a year this channel has been created. I have a special gift for you with my free ebook on green and red flags in women. Click on the link in the description below.
The biggest study ever on the pay gap, I think it was done by Harvard, and they basically looked at Uber drivers in America. So the big reason it was the biggest because they had so much data. Uber obviously has so much data, and men and women both drive Ubers in America. And they looked at the paying, and they were like, well, women are getting paid less at Uber. So how does that make sense? Because it's obviously all automated. So like, what a great way of studying male and female behavior to work out what is in this gap. And there's three things in the gap. The first was men drove at different times of night. So men would do the graveyard shifts, the early mornings where you're getting paid more. They would want to do that. Women less so. The second was that men were more likely to stick with the platform for longer. So they had more experiences and they benefited from that experience. Makes sense of any job. And the third reason, which is 50% of the gap, was that men just drive faster. Let's just drive a little faster, guys, and then we'll close that gap 50% gone.
If we don't realize that men and women are not the same and they act in their own unique ways, we might struggle to make things fair between them. Think about this Uber story. They looked at how men and women drove and earned money. Turns out that men drove at different times, stuck around longer, and even drove a bit faster. Because of these differences, they earn more. So understanding these dissimilarities is like having the key to a locked door. If we don't have the key, we might not be able to unlock the door to fairness. It's important to see these differences so we can work towards making things equal in a way that makes sense for everyone.
Everyone talks about motherhood isn't a choice, and it isn't. But then dads don't get that choice either. Like, they have to go to work. They can't be like, I'm not going to go to work today, because they do. That's how it works. And I don't know if we talk about the sacrifices fathers make in that way. We do talk about mothers, not enough, and we could talk about them more. But I mean, my dad, he's a career father, and he was very successful. He spent his whole life traveling the world, going to conferences, speaking at large events. Really smart guy. But we never saw him. He was out earning money, and my mum took time off from her career to raise my sister and I. And as a result, she's built a massive network of friends, like all her girlfriends around the village. I imagine she met them when she was going to like play school and going to the playground to pick us up. My dad has none of that now. They're both retired, and I guess he's not got that same network of friends that my mum has. And I'm like, the price of his sacrifice is being paid now, but the price of my mum's sacrifice was paid at the time. Now she's enjoying retirement. She's got all her friends. She's got like her family. She's got a great connection to me and my sister because she spent so much time with her. And I'm like, I don't know if my dad has that same benefit because he spent his life working for us, and he didn't have a choice. He had, if you met my mum, he would not. He had to go to work.
Think about it. Moms can decide if they want to work a lot, a little, or stay at home with their kids. But dads usually have to work because they need to earn money for their families. If you're a dad, you have to be the one that provides for his family, no matter how you feel. This is why people often say that men need to be strong and keep their emotions inside, being stoic. It's because they are expected to take care of their families no matter what. And that is the sacrifice that men pay later in life. While the family and the woman are enjoying the money that the man is earning, the man doesn't have the same connection with his children.
We're talking about a meta-analysis of 200 surveys taken across 30 years, collected by probably the greatest expert ever on domestic violence. The man who founded the field of family violence research did the study, and he found that it's not a gendered issue. Men and women abuse each other at more or less equal rates. Professor Murray Strauss, the late Murray Strauss, he's like, I don't know if there is, he literally invented the instruments we now use to study domestic violence, and he's saying that. So if I'm given that data and I still can't change someone's mind, I really don't know what hope there is.
The notion that men and women abuse each other at relatively equal rates raises important questions about our understanding of domestic violence and the broader societal narrative surrounding it. Acknowledging that women can be the perpetrators of abuse just as men can challenge traditional assumptions and encourages a more comprehensive approach to addressing the issue. It is worth noting that lesbian relationships have the highest rate of domestic violence. It highlights the need to move beyond simplistic gender-based categorizations and delve into the intricacies of relationship dynamics, power struggles, and the various factors that contribute to domestic violence. By acknowledging that both men and women can be capable of abusive behavior, we can develop more effective strategies for prevention, intervention, and support for all individuals affected by domestic violence. If you're getting value in this video, leave a like and subscribe to this channel.
I'd say the left create the very problem they're trying to solve in police brutality, because a lot of these left progressive spaces actively participate in that very dehumanizing fear-mongering around men. Like, men are dangerous, like, cross the street, watch out, keep your distance, like, men are terrifying, men are violent. And I'm like, that is actually feeding into the divisive fear-mongering rhetoric. You're sort of creating a cultural fear around men. And I'm like, who's going to pay the biggest price for that? And the answer is black men. Like, because when police start fearing black men, that's when black men get shot. And I'm like, are the left creating the very problem they claim to want to end by explicitly fear-mongering around men?
Throughout history, strong and honorable men have played a big role in keeping our societies safe and balanced. These guys stood up against those who wanted to harm and disturb our way of life. They were tough, not just physically, but also in how they stuck to what's right and fair. In today's world, we need to see that making all men weak isn't the answer. Instead, we should bring back the idea of strong guys who are good at heart. When bad guys see good, strong men around, they are less likely to cause trouble. It's like having a shield that makes everyone think twice before doing wrong. Strong, good men make sure that we treat each other right and are taking responsibility for our actions. Ultimately, the goal is to build a society where strong, good men are not only admired, but also actively contribute to the betterment of our communities. It is about restoring a sense of responsibility and leadership that benefits everyone, while reminding those who would stray from the path of righteousness that their action will not go unchecked.
Professor Sandra Starr, she found that women are twice as likely to avoid prison for the same crime. And if they are sentenced, men will get 63% longer sentence. That's in America. But again, for the same crime, same criminal history. In the UK, like the Ministry of Justice came out with a report, and I think it said men are 88% more likely to be sentenced to prison under similar criminal circumstances. And very little was said and done. That's the Ministry of Justice's own report.
Despite acknowledging the unfairness, there seems to be a lack of action, discussion, and media coverage when it comes to injustices that disproportionately affect men. The research findings that women are twice as likely to avoid prison for the same crime and men receive significantly longer sentences. This is an issue that transcends borders, as evidenced by similar patterns observed in both the United States and the UK. The statistics presented, such as men being 88% more likely to be sentenced to prison in the UK, paint a stark picture of the inequities that persist within the justice system. It is concerning that despite the clear data and official report, these injustices remain largely unaddressed. The lack of discussion and media coverage surrounding this issue highlights a broader problem in society's recognition of gender disparities. The fact that even reports from the very institutions responsible for justice yield little action speaks for the need for more comprehensive reform.
Progressive left spaces just seem very intent on blaming men and boys for their own problems. So if men have poor health outcomes, it's because men aren't going to the doctors enough. If men have mental health problems, it's not speaking enough. If a man gets assaulted on the street, we ask who did it. And like we don't actually engage with these discussions in like good faith. And it's always an accusatory finger. And then we get to the concepts of toxic masculinity and patriarchy, which in my opinion, again, speaking as someone who works for a living writing copy, I feel like those words, they just place the blame back on men's shoulders and they divide people. And I was just like, I think I could do a better job. I think I can do a better job.
Society's tendency to focus on finding solutions for women's issues while pointing fingers at boys and men for their problems is pretty perplexing. Throughout history, men have been seen as expendable, especially in times of war. It's like their role was to protect and provide, even if it meant putting their lives on the line. Fast forward to today. In many workplaces, men still dominate jobs that carry higher risk, leading to a staggering difference in workplace-related death. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, an overwhelming 93% of workplace fatalities are men. Acknowledging that life is unfair might be a bitter pill to swallow, but it is a step forward accepting reality. It's not about playing the blame game of competing over who has it worse. It's about realizing that we should focus on what we can control, our circle of influence.
Black Americans, when you normalize to a population, are about 3.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white Americans, which is a disparity that's worth discussing. But men are 20 times more likely to be killed by a woman. And then when you tell people that, you put them in a very difficult place of cognitive dissonance because they start reaching for, well, men are more violent, which is why they're killed by police. And that certainly would explain some of the disparity. But then are you going to apply that to the racial disparity as well? And I was like, good luck with that one. Good luck with that one. And
this is a fantastic point. The fact that men are 20 times more likely to be killed than women reveals the cognitive dissonance that's hard to ignore. Some say it's because men are more violent, which might explain the disparity in police killing. But Let's pause it for a second. If we challenge this notion for gender, can we apply the same reasoning for racial disparities? It is not about pointing fingers or placing blame. It's about acknowledging that these realities and engaging in conversation to improve the society.
John DM'd me this a couple of days ago. My latest research has just been published. It assessed the views of over 4,000 men in the UK and found that thinking masculinity is bad for your behavior is linked to having worse mental well-being. Around 85% of respondents thought that the term toxic masculinity is insulting and probably harmful to boys.
The idea that men should embrace masculinity for improved mental well-being challenges the prevailing narrative that associates masculinity with negativity. The fact that feminism has contributed to certain negative behaviors in men, such as promiscuity or a lack of accountability for their families, raises questions about the unintended consequences of societal shift. Men should embrace traditional aspects of masculinity, such as being a good provider, protector, father, and husband. That will then lead to healthier family structures. It underlines the importance of men being active participants in their families' lives, taking on roles that promote stability and support. This perspective introduces a call for men to reclaim and redefine true masculinity, focusing on qualities that contribute positively to their own lives, relationships, and the well-being of their families.
Last year, we had the worst year in history of knife crime in terms of the amount of teenagers killed. I mentioned earlier how we talk about gay people historically, we don't talk about gay men. Same for this, we use the word teenagers. Another teenager stabbed to death, 30 teenagers, 35 teenagers. And then I looked at the data, which no one's going to do apart from some nerd like me. Every single one is a boy. Not 90%, not 95%. Everyone, all of them. Every single one was a boy or young man, mostly inner city black boys. And we were reporting them in the newspapers as teenagers or children or like 15-year-old. And I was just like, you should be saying boys. If it was just women, that would be headline news.
The media tends to portray male perpetrators and female victims, while often omitting or downplaying instances where men are the victims, raises important questions about the intention behind these narratives. The fact that all the victims mentioned were boys or young men, especially from inner city black communities, challenges the way we frame and discuss such incidents in the media. Be careful only consuming information from the media. They tend to portray a picture of the world which is not genuine.
A really great report that said male suicide is not a mental health issue primarily. It even described it as a rational decision and a solution-based outcome when men simply cannot deal with the problems around them. And a lot of the men who attempted suicide didn't even consider that they had a mental health problem. They didn't consider themselves as mentally unwell. They're like, I'm not mentally unwell, I'm in debt, I've lost my job, I'm losing my children in child custody courts, I'm a victim of domestic violence. That's another really difficult a bit of hypocrisy from the left, where if you look at male victims of domestic violence, of which there are currently 3 million in the UK, 11% of those men will attempt suicide. So it's frustrating when you talk to advocates who are against male suicide, and that's an important issue to them, but then they'll refuse to talk about domestic violence against men. I mentioned child custody, and Martin Seeger, who is an excellent psychologist, he's linked 20% of the suicides in the UK to child custody battles, family courts, relationship breakdown. And like the family court system in the UK is one of the most heartbreaking institutions you'll ever see. And like for a father to lose his child in a corrupt family court causes so much pain. And a lot of those men, they're not mentally unwell, they've just lost their child. And if you're an advocate of male suicide, and you're not talking about child custody, joblessness, male victims of domestic violence, I will question how effective you're being.
The idea that some men see suicide as a rational response when overwhelmed by these challenges sheds light on the importance of addressing these underlying issues. This perspective underscores the necessity of creating environments where men feel valued, respected, and empowered to overcome the obstacles they encounter. Focusing on improving men's social and economic status, promoting physical well-being through sport, and fostering a sense of purpose through responsibilities can indeed contribute to enhancing men's mental state. By addressing the root causes that contribute to feelings of hopelessness, we can potentially reduce the prevalence of suicide among men. The call for reform of family courts to prevent good men from losing custody of their children after a divorce is particularly poignant. The pain experienced when a father loses access to his children due to a flawed system cannot be underestimated. This highlights the need for a more balanced and just approach that recognizes the importance of fathers in their children's lives.
There was one study last year, University of Manchester, that looked at men who had completed suicide, and of all the middle-aged men who had died by suicide, 91% of them had sought help. So 91% had actually been and gone to therapy or some sort of healthcare provider. And I think 30% of them had sought help the week before their suicide. So it's like, well, you're telling men to talk, but 91% of men who died by suicide did talk, and they still died. And even more shocking is that of those men who died by suicide, who had been sort of seen by a clinician, 80% of them were deemed low risk or no risk. So of these people, of these men that died by suicide, 80% were seen as no risk or low risk. So I think it's more likely that we're simply just misreading male distress.
They keep asking men to talk and open up. But the vast majority of men who commit suicide thought help at some point. But wait, there's more. About 30% of these brave souls had thought help just the week before. Picture that. Reaching out, bearing your soul, and yet the struggle persists. It's like telling someone to scream in the soundproof room. They are shouting, but no one is hearing. Men have this incredible knack for getting their hands dirty, figuratively and literally. They thrive when they are in action, working out the puzzle of life. Feeling useful isn't just a want, it is in their DNA. They take the wheel and drive with purpose, responsibilities. Yes, it's like they are superheroes when they are entrusted with tasks that matter. The power of contributing in real is like fuel to their inner engine. Men need a purpose, need a reason to live, need to have responsibilities. That's the answer to suicide.
What's the story of Norah Vincent?
Norah Vincent was a gay woman and a journalist who, really sad story. She, for her book, I think the book's called Inside Man, she basically lived as a man for, I think, 18 months just to sort of understand what the male experience is like. And she didn't enjoy it. She had to stop early and she had to check herself into psychiatric care. And actually, early this year, she ended her life by suicide because of her mental health.
Whereas for men, Norah says, sexuality is, shall we say, below the waist.
At its core, it's a bodily function. It's a necessity. It is such a powerful drive, and I think because we don't have testosterone in our systems, we don't understand how hard it is.
She came back from her experiment and she was like, women don't know what it's like to be a man. We don't know.
Most women have no clue what it is to be a man. When Norah Vincent decides to pretend to be a man, she does it to prove the point that life as a man is way easier. It turns out that she's faced with the reality, which is that men have to be masculine to succeed in society. They cannot be too emotional. There is also a higher pressure men face when it comes to dating and initiating the courtship, which put them in a vulnerable situation. She eventually finds that men's interaction can be more competitive and focus on shared activity rather than emotional bonding. This sheds light on the different ways men connect and the pressure they experience to fit with their peers. Eventually, Norah realized being a man is extremely complicated. She subsequently commits suicide as a result of the trauma she went through being a man. Do you think being a man is easier or harder than being a woman? Let us know in the comment section below. If you want to know who is the biggest beneficiary of marriage today, click on this video. Enjoy.